Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Blueprint Podcast. Real people, real stories. Chasing dreams, overcoming obstacles. Come get inspired and take action. I know you're ready. Let's go.
Welcome back to the Entrepreneurial Blueprint. Today I have my friend, a big trial attorney, and a fellow coach of mine, Mr. Don Wright. Don, how are you?
Doing well, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I think just to really introduce why we brought you on and just for the listeners, when I sit and think about who would be a good guest for our listeners, also for us, and what this podcast really means, we want listeners to understand, that life is about balance. You can be really successful at whatever you do while also enjoying different facets of your life. So I'll let you obviously dive in and introduce who you are in a few minutes, Dom. But, to me, I see you as a really successful trial attorney who owns his own law firm. I see you as a father first to obviously two boys who are athletic and unbelievable and involved in a lot of things, a husband, but also a coach, someone that finds time every day to go to practice or games and really is committed to it. And so just seeing you in all of these different facets in your life, I think really defines what this podcast is becoming really successful, but also taking time and making sure that you're enjoying your life and bettering the lives of people around you. So just, I guess, introduce who you are and why you make, why you get involved in all these things. And we can go from there.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm a trial lawyer, Maryland trial lawyer. My practice is primarily criminal defense. I do some civil litigation, some personal injury and some kind of offshots of that, having, done this for a long time. But I guess, I was licensed in 2002. So this will be coming up on 23 years that I've been doing this. I'm licensed in Maryland state courts and in federal court. And my practice revolves mostly around just, really serious criminal defense matters. I handle, murder cases, non-fatal shootings, armed robberies, gun cases, like I said, in state and federal court. I started out, I grew up in upstate New York, and I started out, my father was captain of an oil barge in New York City. And when I was younger, his company would go on strike a lot. And for barge workers, when one company goes on strike, the entire harbor back then would shut down because we're all part of the same union. And my dad was involved in the union. He'd bring me down from upstate New York down to New York City to meet with the union's attorneys. And it made an impression on me that there were these guys, I liked the fancy offices, they just seemed really knowledgeable and capable, and they were helping these working people out. And it was something I wanted to do. So I went to law school thinking I would do this. I got into a labor law class in my first year of law school and realized that it was mind-numbingly boring and that I hated it. So then I was like, oh no, I've wasted all this money. What do I do here? So then I just kind of started finding things that I liked about the law. Like, what am I good at? I liked writing. I liked talking. I figured, okay, I think maybe I'll be a good trial lawyer. So I started pursuing a path that would take me into trial law. When I graduated from law school, I got a job working for a boutique law firm in Baltimore County that was doing a lot of insurance litigation. And I was good at it. I was getting good results for the clients. The partners liked me, but I did not like it. I didn't like the subject matter of the work. I just found it, boring. And I'm the type of person that, you just mentioned all those things that I do now. It doesn't feel like work to me, and it's because I enjoy it. If I enjoy and I'm engaged by the things that I'm working on, I'll work hard. If I'm not so much. It's hard. It's just hard to motivate myself, So a buddy of mine, I was a young lawyer. I went out to lunch with him, and he was a criminal defense lawyer. And we're talking about our cases. And, he was telling me this really interesting robbery case that he was handling. And I was thinking, man, all I did today was like save an insurance company some money. Your case sounds really interesting. So I just started taking criminal defense cases because I liked it. how I got to my own firm is a little bit different of a story. I was, with that practice in Baltimore County, and I started bringing in my own clients. I've always had an entrepreneurial interest. My parents were small business owners. They were always looking for, some business relationship opportunities, and they just had that, there's a spirit, I feel like, among entrepreneurs that's kind of in you, if you have that drive and that interest to start your own business and create businesses. And I was always interested in it. So I was like, I went to the partners. I was starting to bring in my own clients, but I was young. And I said, look, I think it's time for you to make me a partner in this law firm. And, these were old school guys, and they were kind of like, I was probably about your age, Matt. And they're like, you're too young, you could. I'm like, well, I'm not too young to be bringing in these big clients. So why am I not too young to not be treated as a partner? So I made the decision to leave the firm and start my own practice, which was scary. But at the time, I wasn't married. I didn't own a house. I figured the worst thing that was going to happen is I was going to fall on my face, and I'd have to pick myself up, sleep on a buddy's couch maybe for a month or something until I got a new job and got it,
Right.
So it felt risky at the time, but I just didn't have a lot on the line at that point in my life, really. So I did it, and it became successful. I, networked and developed a client base. Spent a lot of time trying cases so that I could get my name out there, and kind of, even still to this day, I don't do a lot of marketing. My network of clients come to me through results that I achieve in the courtroom.
Yeah.
So, like I'll have, ring with today's Monday morning, 3 different prospective clients, and I can trace back cases 10 years, 15 years ago that I had that were a referral source for this case or another. And it developed into my own thing that I have now. So I've been doing my own practice for probably about a little under 20 years, maybe 17, 18 years, something like that.
Yeah.
And then, in terms of these other things that I do, at a certain point, you got to make a decision about what do you want the practice to look like, right? So to this day, I've got, there are 2 or 3 attorneys that work with me. I've got a full-time paralegal. I've got my wife manages the office, so there's office manager, and we've got law clerks and interns and stuff. But it's a small size firm by design, and what I mean by that is it's important for me to be doing the things that I enjoy, and I enjoy being in the courtroom. I could very easily have a much bigger firm where I have a family law division. I've got an immigration division. I could hire lawyers because I get calls for those types of cases all the time, but I end up sending them out to other colleagues and referral sources. But I'd be more of a managing attorney that's in the office as opposed to a trial lawyer, which is what I like to do. Probably could make some more money the other way. Maybe, I don't know. But look, the fact of the matter is, it depends on how you measure success, right? I measure success by, of course, there's financial success, and that's important. But by being able to do the things that I want to do. I love baseball.
Right.
I played baseball in high school. I played a little bit in college. I've coached for a long time. When my oldest son, went to Beth DeFilla, they were looking for a new varsity coach. I offered to help coach. I didn't intend to be the head coach. I didn't want to be the head coach, actually, because my son was coming in as a freshman, and I didn't want there to be any perception that he was, maybe getting playing time because his dad was the coach or anything. So I agreed initially to be the assistant coach. They had some problems with the head coach and ended up letting him go mid-season, and then I took over as the head coach, and I've been the head coach. This is my 4th season as the head coach of Beth DeFilla. But before that, I was been very involved in baseball. I was the president of Wellwood Baseball. I coached, a bunch of travel teams. And excuse me. But for me, I've been able to organize my business in a way that allows me to do the things that I really enjoy. And in the spring, everyone knows in my office, I don't set any lengthy trials in the spring because I'm going to be in baseball 5 days a week. A murder trial will last a week to 2 weeks. A federal prosecution, a week to 2 weeks. All those trials I put in the fall and in the winter. I also like to take off a good amount of time in the summer and go to the beach. So, and that's for me. That's to me. That's success for me, right? I mean, I'm able to send my kids to private school. I'm able to make the money to live the way I want to live. But more importantly to me than even those things is I'm able to handle the types of cases that I want to handle as a lawyer. And I'm able to really, I call being the head coach of Beth DeFilla my first job, and that I practice law. Because that's my favorite thing that I do. Honestly, being on the baseball field with those kids and with you and the other coaches, that's my favorite place to be.
Right. And I got to tell you, this is obviously our first year. We've been doing it for a month together, but I've learned a lot already. And we spoke about this yesterday. I'm a very hardcore coach. I grew up, my father, I obviously work with him. He's a very hardcore guy. He likes things done quickly. He pushed me to be my best, right? And it worked for us. Mm-hmm. And largely, especially coaching kids, at Beth DeFilla, the hardcore style works a little bit, but seeing how you, delegate information you don't know about baseball to the other coaches, but also two, really can rally the guys and get them to want to come every day to become better players, work together as a team. And even if they're not playing well, or they botch an opportunity in play, watching them come back to the bench and giving it their full 100%. And I don't think that, they're a great group of guys, and I think large credit to them and their parents. But also I think the way you have formed the culture at this school and for this team is not a coincidence. And like I said, I've learned a lot about that from you. But also I've been extremely impressed by you win. You win. You win as a lawyer. You're a winner. Even when I was trying to do research on you for our podcast, I was like, there really isn't that much on his law firm online. Mm-hmm. And so when you're saying it's all referral, that makes a lot of sense. And so you're right. This is the type of stuff that, and to our listeners and a lot of our franchises that we try to preach is you need balance in life, and you can be successful at a lot of different things where you don't have to work 18 hours a day.
Yes.
So I also want to jump in a little bit to some of the cool stories you have of being a lawyer. I know that probably will get our listeners intrigued by this. We can jump into a few other topics towards the end. Some advice you'd give to our listeners, potential franchisees, or just people in business in general. But I think I want to start by, I love a lot of these, crime shows, Blue Bloods and Law and Order. And you see the really cool Hollywood crazy stories that, someone finds evidence at the last second and it changes the whole case. Or one of my favorite movies, My Cousin Vinny. How realistic is Hollywood, and what is real life actually like?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned My Cousin Vinny. I had an evidence professor that uses My Cousin Vinny, I think to this day, to teach the rules of evidence. That's it's farcical, it's a comedy, and a lot of it's exaggerated, obviously, for comedic effect. But some of the courtroom procedure in My Cousin Vinny is the most accurate of any law film or show. Examples are, at the end, there's the famous scene where Marissa Tomei takes the witness stand and she's an expert witness in automotive. And, how could you be an expert? May I voir dire this witness? The prosecutor says. And really, in Maryland, in order to be an expert witness, you have to know more on a particular subject matter than the average layperson. That's it. You don't have to have degrees. You can have that knowledge by either experience or education or a combination of both of them. And she had it through experience. She grew up in a garage. She knows everything about cars, and she knows more than the normal person. And she was able to talk about that tire pattern. There were, authenticating photographs and, just different the rules of discovery. Remember, there's that scene where he said, "Man, if I only knew what he knows, I could craft a defense." Well, that's in the rules of evidence that the prosecution has to turn over everything that they have, and so I thought that was really fun. My thing about courtroom dramas is, some of them are not really realistic in terms of how they come across and how they're presented and acted and all that. What is usually pretty real though is the drama, and that's what attracts me to it is the players involved, the personalities of the police and the witnesses and the clients and the victims and the families, and the fact that when you do like the types of cases that I do, the consequences are really high, the potential consequences. So the stakes are high. Right. A lot of times I'm in trial and once we finished and we're waiting for that verdict, I'm standing next to a guy that's about to find out, am I going home tonight or am I going to die in prison? Wow. Right. And it's intense. For me, the way that I have dealt with that pressure is I don't let, and I tell people that work here all the time the same thing, don't let our clients' problems become our problems. We're not the reason that they're in this mess, right? But we're going to do everything we can to try to help them out of it the best that we can. And sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. Sometimes the police have done a really good job. The jury's done a really good job. The judge, the prosecutors, and they got the right person. You happen to be representing them. And you're trying to maybe either mitigate his exposure or you're trying to throw a Hail Mary pass and maybe convince the jury that there's not enough evidence to convict this person. But at the end of the day, I'm going to walk out the same door that I walked in. And as long as I've done everything that I know needs to be done, then I can rest comfortably at night, regardless of the result. I tell new people that come to meet with me when they're thinking of hiring me, and this is true. It's not just like a sales pitch I make. I try to do in every single case what I would want my lawyer doing for me if I was in my client's situation, right? So I take all my experience, all my knowledge about this process and think, all right, if I was facing this situation right here, what would I want my lawyer out there doing for me? What type of investigation, what type of strategy would I want my lawyer putting in place for me? And as long as you kind of guide yourself with that principle, it's kind of like the golden rule of practicing law. I think it's you'll do well. I actually want to talk about something you hit on a little bit earlier when you were talking about our styles. We kind of have, one way to look at it is maybe that we have contrasting styles. I think we have complementary styles.
Right. I agree.
Because one of the things that there's the old adage, there's two ways to lead. You can lead by having people fear you or having people love you. And my style, I guess it's maybe my natural style is to lead by having people love me, to be an example and to, positive reinforcement and to have, I like our baseball team. I like our kids to be relaxed. I like them to have fun. Yeah. I think people perform better when they are not on edge about, the ball.
They're enjoying the game, right? They're enjoying the game why they started playing in the first place. Exactly.
Yes. There's a downside to that though. There's goods and bads to each style, right? And I think what you're pointing out is you're learning stuff from me that could help make you a better coach. And even though I'm twice your age, I'm learning things from you that make me a better coach. Right. And part of being a leader of a company or a baseball team or anything is realizing your own strengths, but also just as importantly is realizing your own weaknesses. And when I finished a baseball season, the last off season was my third off season. I take stock of everything, of the players, of the incoming players, the people we're losing, the athletic department, and the coaching staff, and see what needs to be improved next year to make us a better baseball team. And I knew, I've been trying to get you to coach with me for years now, right? Yeah. I feel like I was going to start hiding in your bushes and jumping out in the morning. Right? Come on, come coach with us. But I know from observing you and from the feedback I would get from players that I knew played with you and other coaches, the type of coach you were, the type of intensity that you brought to the game, the knowledge, the experience, the preparation. I knew that these are things that just instinctively, I knew these are things that you're better at than I am. And when you're confronted with a situation like that, you can do the smart thing to do is to acknowledge that and say, oh geez, let's collaborate with this person then, because it's going to make me better. It's going to make our organization better. Some people get defensive about it and say, no, it's my way or the highway. And I've never viewed it that way. I've never viewed it like, oh, well, if you're a taskmaster and I'm not, we can't work together. I think, and I will say that even the short time we've been coaching together, the coaching staff, that part of it, the practices and the preparation and the coaching has never been stronger.
I agree with you. And I'm seeing, we have, again, I don't want to just take the credit for both you and me. We have, shout out to Adam Gladstone. We have Greg Krupkin. I mean, like Greg is a great example. I sent him a really cool drill on Barry Bonds, hitting the ball off the plate, shortstop or second base, depending on what side you hit from the plate, helps you keep your front side in. A lot of guys are, struggle with pulling the front side out. So what's he do? He takes Sam, his son, to the hitting cages or to his backyard the next day, and then he works on it. And he sends me stuff, and I say, that's great. Let's introduce it to the guys. Or Adam Gladstone calls me up before a game and says, hey, what do you think about this? Right? I think that collaboration, and again, that's just why I love baseball so much. And I know this is, a business podcast and whatnot, but I always tell people business or baseball, just playing it over the years, baseball is a really good metaphor for life, because there's a lot of different ways you can play it. There's a lot of different little games inside the big game. Learning how to compete, learning how to fail and to move on. To me, there's nothing else that really prepares you for life the way baseball does. You're going to fail a lot, but you also got to enjoy it. You got to know the successes are going to come. And then when you do succeed, you got to keep going, right? You got to have a strong mental game. You have to understand that you have to move on, as we're preaching now, win the next pitch. But also you have to have a really good culture. And again, credit to you, because like I said, it's hard to find coaches who will delegate things out. Because they're stubborn and say, I want this my way, and if you don't like it, then I'll find someone who will. But you've delegated things out to each and every coach, the stuff that you don't know, and vice versa. We've delegated things to you, especially getting the kids rallying around you and getting them comfortable. And again, I think it all ties back to you being a successful lawyer. I think you've probably learned a lot of these lessons. You've probably made a lot of failures as well in business and as a lawyer. But things, I think, as you get older and mature and you spend time around really good people, you start to learn these things, and you can start teaching them to people around you.
There are a lot of analogies, a lot of connections between running a baseball team and running a company are similar in a lot of ways. And I've always described to the old adage, you can tell a lot about a person by being on the baseball field with them over a period of time. A lot about a person, right? And how they interact with their teammates, how they interact with their opponents and the coaches and the umpires, and how they handle, there's so much failure built into baseball. Even the greatest players in the world fail more than they succeed. That's the nature of the game. And so, it builds a resiliency, it builds a toughness. It teaches you how to lose. It teaches you how to win, and it teaches you how to build a successful team. As a coach, as a head coach, it's very similar to being a CEO of a company. And, I can't, there are things that I can't do as well as you, or as well as Adam, or as well as Greg. And the idea is, though, to build a team, because I think for business, for me, to me, probably the single most, or one of the most important parts of it is forming and nurturing good relationships with very capable people and people that you enjoy working with. Right. So, when I look at my own business or the baseball team, I look at, okay, what do we need? What are the component parts that we need to be successful? And let me try to find those people and bring them into my organization so that I can build relationships with these people and be successful. It just makes sense for me to do it that way. And, I have no problem at all. I tell people all the time, I tell them here at my law office, and I tell people on my baseball team, I check my ego at the door. You'll never hear from me, well, I'm the head coach, or I'm the head, you better listen to me. No, look, of course, there are points where as the managing attorney of a law firm or the head coach of a baseball team, decisions have to be made, and there needs to be an executive, I guess, that makes those decisions. Right. And that's right. My role on the team. You get advice from certain people. Sometimes the advice lines up. Sometimes you get conflicting advice, and you got to make those decisions. But it's never, for me, it's never from a place of I know more than everybody, so listen to me and come along for the ride. For me, it's always a collaborative process. I like more information to help me make decisions the best that I can, and for me to understand things that I know that I don't know. I mean, I played baseball in the 1990s. The game has developed so much. Yeah. The preparation, the practice, the training it's night and day from when I used to play. Right. Guys didn't even used to lift weights when I played baseball. It was like frowned upon. The guys would go to the gym. We used to just run and we'd throw. Like that's all we did. Right. So if I was preparing a team based on how I prepared as a player 30 years ago, we wouldn't be a very good baseball team. So no, I know that.
Yeah, go ahead. Now I was just gonna say,
we did bring that out.
Yeah, and I was gonna say one of the aspects that you brought up, but even I want to touch even more on is my father wrote a book, Abe's Final Masterpiece. We talk a lot about it. We've talked about it on the podcast before. It's an Amazon bestseller. He gives it to all of his clients and franchisees that come on. But one of the things he talks about in business or anything you do, no one should ever have to ask, what is wrong? You should be able to come prepared wherever you're going with a neutral face. And look, you're in one of the probably, I would say, top 5 toughest professions to be in. Like you said, you're standing next to a guy who's either going home with his family tonight or going to spend the rest of his life in jail, probably going to die there. And then you have to find that switch where you come to the field the next day. You have to come home to your kids and not wear it on your face. And you have to be the best father you can be when you come home. You have to be the best coach you can be when you get to the field or whatever it may be. Or even coming back to the office, you have to, again, switch it quickly because you have the next trial to prepare for. So to me, again, going back to the whole baseball analogy, we tell our guys, win the next pitch. Last pitch is gone, right? You just hit a double. Congratulations. Now you have to work on you have to focus on your base running and getting back out into the fielder. We have a lot of pitchers that hit in the game as well. So you just struck out. Well, guess what? You have to go shut them down, even though you struck out the bases loaded. That mental toughness, I'm sure, took a long time for you to develop. Being a trial.
It did. I mean, I got to read your dad's book because that's a really interesting point. An insight there that as you were saying that, I was thinking of something specific in trial work. So it's easy when things are going your way in a trial or in a business meeting or it's easy to navigate that, right? I mean, okay, this person is hearing, they're receptive to my sales pitch. I can feel that this is going right. The real challenge is when things go bad, right? For me, and I tell when I'm preparing my clients to sit through a trial, I'm like, listen, there are going to be times in this trial where things are going good. We don't want to be celebrating too much because what we're really doing is there are 12 people on the jury that we're trying to influence. Some of them might be inclined to lean our way right out of the gate. Some of them might be in the middle, and some of them might be leaning towards the prosecution. We're not talking to those people that are already on our side. We're talking to the people that are inclined to vote against us or haven't made their minds up yet. We're trying to convince them to come over to our side. And there's going to be a point in the trial, and this goes to the mental toughness piece that you're talking about, where we're going to hear the worst evidence against us, right? There's going to be a witness that's going to identify you as the person that shot this guy. Right. There's going to be the DNA expert's going to come up and say, you know what, man, that's your DNA on this gun. And the jury, you know what, as soon as that's presented, they don't look over at the prosecutor. they turn over to the defense table and see how we're reacting.
Wow.
And those moments can influence. And if I'm sitting there like, oh my God, I can't believe,
Right.
oh no, disaster. Then that is just that's gonna emphasize for the government their what they hoped, would be the big impact of that. But if I appear confident, if I appear unmoved, if I have a good response to that, then that's how I'm going to be able to be successful in that moment.
Yeah.
And your dad's absolutely right. If I play that any other way, forget it, because they're not going to listen to anything else I have to say. It's going to seem disingenuous, because what's going to ring the truest to the people I'm trying to influence in that jury box is how I reacted when I heard the bad information. Right? That's an emotional moment. That's an emotional connection that you can have the fanciest, the slickest tongue in the world and come out with all these great arguments, but nothing overcomes those authentic emotional moments. And you need to be able to navigate them, and you need to have the resolve and the toughness and the ability to stand there. And I developed it over years of just of doing this type of work and understanding that was required. And kind of over the years, I share a story with law clerks. When I was a younger lawyer, one of the things that scares you the most as a young trial lawyer is being asked something that you don't know the answer to, or something happening that you're like, geez, I don't even know what's going on here. Like I don't.
Right.
So I was trying to get a case dismissed once for a speedy trial, and the judge turned for violation of the guy's speedy trial rights. And the judge turned to me and said, "Okay, Mr. Wright," I was like 2 years out of law school. Tell me the 4 factors under such and such case that I have to consider in a speedy trial motion. And I had no idea what he was talking about. And I would wish that the floor would open up. But in that moment, I stood there. I didn't tell him that I didn't know. I tried to pivot. I tried to do everything I could. But it taught me a lot how to stand there in that moment and take that heat and not let the moment overwhelm you, and just, fight your way through it.
Yeah. It's funny. I think we came up with a really interesting premise for a new good book. Why being a lawyer is like playing baseball. I think we're onto something here.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
No, in business. I mean, I think just in business, these things, these principles kind of transcend like what you're trying to do, because in business you're trying to influence people, right? And you're trying to your relationships with your clients, your customers, or the people you're doing business with, and these are definitely relatable and transferable concepts.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. I mean, we've talked about already, learning to understanding what you know and what you don't know, but you also have to find the fine line between learning to change your habits or whatnot, but also being willing, if you have a philosophy and in your mind you truly believe it's the right philosophy, not letting outside influence change that. We live in a culture everywhere that people have gotten so, I don't want to use the word soft, but I think soft is a good word. I think one of my favorite stories, I'm a diehard Ravens fan, is John Harbaugh, likely a Hall of Fame coach. He came in, got hired in 2007. Ray Lewis and Ed Reed were the captains of that team, right? Greatest safety maybe ever, and obviously maybe the greatest linebacker in pro football history. They, especially Ed Reed, hated John Harbaugh. Couldn't stand him, right? Mm-hmm. He was this guy who was a player's coach. He wasn't this tough, hard-nosed guy come in. He was a player's coach. He wanted people to come in and talk to him. He was trying to build a culture there. He was trying to build relationships, and Ed Reed didn't like each other. I don't even think they spoke to each other for the first 4 months. Until finally Harbaugh called him into the office and said, "Look, you may not like me. You may not like what I'm doing, but we have to respect each other here." Came to be over the next, actually the entirety of Ed Reed's time in Baltimore, they became very close. But what I learned from John Harbaugh in that scenario is he understood that no matter what, he was going to stick to his philosophy. You didn't have to like it. The guys didn't have to like it. And that's been really tough for me as a coach. I have a philosophy. I'm very, stuck on it. And at first I was worried about guys judging me or giving me looks when they thought it was weird, some of the drills I implement. But over time, and I actually spoke to one of the guys on the team about it. I said, if you believe in something and you really believe it's going to work and it's for the benefit of people around you, don't let outside influences stop you from trying to accomplish that. It's a scary thing, especially in business. People are going to tell you not to go into business. I'm sure you had, like you had in your law firm, older gentlemen laughing at you saying, I want to become a partner, but you believed in yourself. The reason we are able to find franchises, strategic partners from around the country is they believe in themselves and we believe in them. And they, to this point, have not let anybody stop them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, I think just listening to someone like you or how you coach and the players, if you're going to coach players or you're going to start a business or you're thinking of taking a big leap, jumping into a business or making a move or whatever it may be, if you believe in it, don't let anybody stop you. And it sounds cliche, but it's a tough thing. It's a really tough thing being judged by other people.
No, you're right. I mean, when I was thinking, thinking about kind of my process of how I got to where I am and, the journey that I've had as a business person, as a lawyer, when I look back at it, honestly, the biggest challenge, the hardest part of it was taking the leap. Was I had this idea, I did have this belief in myself, but there were people telling me no, not yet. Give it 5-10 years and you'll get there. And I'm thinking, well, geez, I feel like I'm there now. Like, why can't I do it now? But so you always have that doubt. What if I fail? And taking the leap and saying, I'm doing this. I'm committing to it. I'm doing it. That, looking back at it, that was the hardest part. And once, it's like once you jump off the cliff, you're flying, man, or you're crashing, right? And it requires a lot of mental toughness. But also, it requires an ability to adapt. And it requires communication. So one of my skills I think that I have is that I'm a good communicator. So I always try to, and people have in baseball world have kind of challenged me on this a little bit. So, well, you're the head coach, man. You don't have to explain yourself, but I want to. I want people to understand why I'm doing something. If I've got a player that is used to starting and I'm not starting him the next day for one reason or another, I'm gonna give him a courtesy. I'm gonna call him up and say, hey, listen, I still believe in you. This is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm making this change in the lineup. Or I tell players all the time, we can only start 9 guys on the team, and we've got more than 9 on the team. If you have a question about why you're not in the starting lineup, come to me. I'll tell you my process, how I make these decisions. You might not agree with my evaluation, but at least you'll understand where I'm coming from and why I'm doing it. That way you're not having to speculate or guess. And that I think is important. Especially, I think for your style, it could be very important because you don't want them. I mean, you're doing this because you enjoy it, but I could, you really care about your players. That's obvious, right?
Yeah.
And, you don't want, and if you're being hard on them, if you're pushing them, you're trying to demand the best from them. Sometimes it goes a long way to just go up to a guy and say, hey, listen, I'm riding you because I think a lot of you, I'm giving you a hard time here, man, because I know you can be great and I'm trying to help you get there. That's why I'm doing it. Not because I'm trying to just be a thorn in your side, so that the communication component, I think, is a big part of it. But you're right, man. I think, I'm not afraid. I don't have any problem with the word. You don't want to be soft.
Yeah.
You don't. You got to have that resiliency and that toughness. For sure.
Learning the mental toughness. Yeah. Well, I want to just 5 more minutes. And I want to end. Usually I ask for one piece of advice, so I'll ask you that at the end. But your favorite or coolest story you have as a trial attorney? I'm sure a lot of listeners are going to want to hear something like this.
Oh boy, let me think. That's a good one. That's a good one. Well, I had. So I had a case not too long ago. It was, sometimes I go into these cases and you have to take risks in my business, but they're calculated risks. So I'll tell a guy, you're facing this. Here's the offer in your case. This is what the state's offering you if you plead guilty. And here is, what you win. If you win, it's not guilty. You go home. Here's the strength of the defense. And you got to make a cost benefit analysis. Do I negotiate my way out or do I go to trial? But sometimes the stakes are the consequence is so high, like in a murder case or an attempted murder, and they want you to go to jail for 60 or 70 years, even if the risk is great because the evidence is strong against you, you take that risk anyway, because who wants to sign up for 60 or 70 years in prison? So I had this one case where a guy he was charged with a non-fatal shooting, and the victim identified him as the shooter. And he was going to come into the victim was he was not a drug dealer, he was just a regular civilian that happened to get shot, in this incident, was shot, told the police, my guy shot him. And he was going to come into court and say, this guy shot him. So we're sitting there and I'm thinking, geez, this is horrible. We're not going to win this one. Right.
Yeah.
But when the police first came to him in the hospital, he said he didn't know who shot him. And then a week later they come back and he says, yeah, it's this guy here. I know he shot him. So I'm cross-examining him. Sometimes, it's the old adage, it's better to be lucky than good sometimes. I'm cross-examining this guy and I'm saying, well, Mr. So-and-so, Mr. Witness, when the police came to you in your hospital bed, you said that you didn't know who shot you. Were you telling the truth then? He says, yeah, I was telling the truth. And I was like, well, and then they came a week later and you said that it was my client. Were you telling the truth then? Yeah, I was telling the truth. I was like, well, what happened between you telling the truth and saying that you didn't know, and a week later you're pointing the finger at my guy? What's the source of your information? I mean, did you? He's like, no. He's like, well, they had me on this really heavy pain medication, and I started having flashbacks and dreams. And I was like, so the source of your information to identify this guy as a flashback and a dream that you had? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, oh my God, it was like a Perry Mason moment. And it literally, it felt like it just fell out of the sky. I had a case literally 3 weeks ago, because it doesn't happen very often, right? The aha moments that you see on TV and television, they're so rare in an actual courtroom.
And you just need to prove doubt, right? Your whole job is just to prove doubt.
That's usually what I'm doing. I'm just trying to pick away at the case and say, look, it's just there's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt here. You don't have to think that this guy's innocent, but we can agree that they haven't proven their case and you should find him not guilty.
Right.
But occasionally you do have those moments. There was this fight that happened on video in Fells Point, and I'm defending this guy. And the victim, I knew my guy had never laid hands on this guy because I saw the video. And I asked him, I'm like, we can agree that my guy never kicked you or hit you, right? And he's like, no, he did. It's on the video. And I knew it wasn't on the video. I called the guy off the witness stand. I'm like, all right, well, let's watch this video. Show me where he hits you. And we watched the whole video. And at the end of it, the guy's like, oh, wow, I didn't. You're right. I'm so sorry. And he actually apologized to me from the witness stand. And it was like, I had all these questions I was going to ask afterwards. I was like, no further questions, Judge. I'm going to sit down now.
Right now, that's the appearance. Right to the appearance. Wow.
And I looked like a genius, but really all it was a matter of preparing and knowing that what he said was wrong, because I had done my legwork. I prepared, and it kind of came together in this one, moment that was dramatic and pretty funny.
Yeah. Well, Don, I'm going to let you go because we have a game in about an hour. So I'll probably let you get to the field.
Sounds good.
Awesome, man. Well, look, I really enjoyed that. I'd love to have you back on here in a few months, talk more. Maybe after the season, we can let the listeners know how our season fared out. And, but again, I do appreciate you coming on, and I'm sure our listeners are going to love this as well.
Thank you very much, man. It's great being here.
All right.